Hey, I'm Grant and welcome to the State of the Channel for April 30th. So, lots to talk about. So I took a bunch of PTO. I'm actually off today to kind of work on things. Particularly, I spent the weekend working on a ton of JavaScript and Ruby on Rails, which is always fun, but goes really slowly. So glad I can get that out of the way, but it's tiring. I think the main thing I want to talk about is just the direction of the channel and what I want to do next. It's something that I've been thinking about a lot this weekend, about what I would like to do next. And are all my current things that I produce, are they leading me where I want them to? I think that's kind of the question I was thinking about. And where do I want to eventually go with this? So when I originally set out and did all these kind of shows as I think of them, so stuff like the podcast, I do this State of the Channel, I do that RuneScape show every Saturday, just something small. The whole point was to do it on a schedule. Get used to doing things faster, getting used to doing them better on a time limit, and just kind of committing to things. And I think I achieved that. And I think honestly this weekend I've really felt that I kind of got everything I wanted out of that. And I could still keep doing that. Like I still have Legacy of Kain all filmed. It's in my editor, it's all set up. I just need to start going through it. I actually have, I think, the first 5 episodes done, more or less. It's just, I guess I got in kind of a slump because I was thinking, is this really what I want to be using my time for? And this kind of came up because when you look at like the scale of me building a website from scratch and fully understanding every component of it, as well as learning JavaScript, Ruby on Rails. I'm gonna need to do a bunch of stuff with just actually running the site and backing it up. I was wondering if I shouldn't just kind of completely invert that, because I was spending probably 3 to 4 nights a week just with my extra time on the video creation, and then like maybe 1 or 2 on learning that stuff, when I know that's going to take a ridiculous amount of time. And at the end of the day, I always, as much as I like being able to do stuff like White Knight, Legacy of Kain, and I think I could base the channel around that, at the end of the day, it's still kind of a little indulgent. It is just me playing games I want to. Whereas stuff like the Ruby on Rails, that's something that is a huge hurdle, but also I could eventually finish. In theory, with the like LP stuff or like the podcast, I'm never done. I'm just done for that week. So I was wondering if I shouldn't instead just really invert my resources and go all out on learning that, get it done, and then come back to something like a Legacy of Kain or whatever I want to do at the time is. And furthermore, I want to talk kind of about like the series I'd like to produce and where I'd like them to take me. Like I said, I felt like I'm kind of at the end of this scheduling part of the channel, because for the longest time, I've never really been focused on growth, especially after the change where I would need to get 1,000 subscribers to monetize. That's kind of like, well, I could, but if I need to do that, I need to completely change what I was doing. And I would definitely, it's always been hard because I definitely think one of the fundamental flaws with this channel has always been it's just very sporadic and unfocused and doesn't have a topic. And I think that's kind of the thing that's always had an issue. And you can even look at just like the podcast I run as its own little thing, that I always get asked when people, they learn I have a podcast, like, oh, well, what's it about? Because they expect it to be, this is a podcast about cycling. This is a podcast about news. This is a podcast about, I don't know, video games or something. But really, it doesn't have a topic. It just kind of is what it happens to be that week. And that makes it very hard to consume unless you're really into the people on the podcast, which, unless you know me personally, probably is not a big thing. And so if you look at the channel as a whole, I think it's always been that. I think for a while, I was essentially clearly a Dead Rising channel. That's what it was, because I was doing streams of Dead Rising 1 and 2, and I had just played 3, and then 4 came out right at then, and I just kept rolling. And I did Dead Rising Chop to You Drop, and I could still look back and see that stuff still does very well. And I always wondered if I shouldn't have stuck with it, because while Dead Rising I don't even think is a top 10 game for me, I clearly was building like an audience, and I'll admit I don't think that's something that's huge. Like, I don't think that there is an unlimited number of people who are looking for like YouTube Dead Rising content. I had wondered maybe what I should do is really focus on that, get 1,000 subscribers just based off that Dead Rising audience, and then somehow use that for the next venture. It's just a lot of like what ifs, and I was never really sure. But then you look at the end of that, like Dead Rising Chop You Drop, and all of a sudden like there was a very hard cut where I just stopped making Dead Rising content. And then now I have all this other stuff that's not relevant at all. It's all this stuff I did over here. And I think that very much divided the views I got on the channel and makes it very hard to build. I have always had the debate with myself whether or not I should split off and do separate channels, because I don't do much for like RuneScape at all. Like, it's meant to be just like very nice, simple, quick passes, and I don't even really have to think about it too much. Like, that's what that's meant to be. And I don't really expect that to grow much. But I've always wondered how, if you subscribe to me for that, you'll get updates to it. But for most of it, you just see this channel, it's kind of like whatever. Whereas if I just split that off entirely into its own channel, yeah, it would only have one video a week, and it's probably not high quality, but then at least you know what you're getting when you subscribe to that channel. It's its own concrete thing. And I still have that debate, and I don't know, maybe like I've thought about just going in, taking all my archives, pull all the ones I have from YouTube, and just rebuilding like a taken for granted OSR's channel. There's just all these debates, and I don't know. And the greater question I feel like this kind of made me have was, I feel like I kind of lack a certain passion for anything on the channel, or just like as a hobby. Like, I really like figuring out how to make a podcast. I enjoy the filming of it and the editing and solving those issues and running the whole channel. I really enjoy that, but I don't actually have an overall direction. Like, I don't have this thing where I'm so into OSRS that I want to make an OSRS only channel. I'm not, because ultimately I don't play that game really heavily. I let it run over here while I'm editing. So I want to make it about that. But at the same time, I kind of want to make some. Same with Dead Rising. Like, it's not my favorite game ever. I don't want to commit my life to a Dead Rising channel. But at the same time, it's a good game. I like it, and there's fun content, and it has an important history to my channel at least. So it's like, again, it's like a very 6 out of 10 thing. Or then I look at stuff like the podcast. Really love it. It's fun, but ultimately it is kind of just like a whatever show that doesn't mix with anything else on the channel. Very 6 out of 10. And I think that's been the longest thing that I need to figure out, is I need some kind of thing that is, this is what my channel is about. And right now I can't tell you what that is. If I had to, I'd say right now my channel is the Digression Bar podcast, which I want to keep going because I really like. I think that just needs to be reformatted a little bit to be a little more consistent. But I guess that's the closest thing. But I'm trying to think what I need to come up with, some kind of series that is my main thing. Like, this is what the channel is. And I don't know what that could be at the moment. I definitely have debates. And I think the hard thing is I can kind of see what it needs to be and what it can't be. So it needs to be essentially something that I can do very, I don't want to say easily, but something that I can do consistently. It needs to be something I can basically do with one person, which cuts out a lot of things. So yeah, I could potentially get an extra if I need it, but I can't have like a 4-person comedy skit team. I can't do that because it's just me on the channel. Same with, I can't really do any kind of narrative content because it's just me, unless it's me just reading a story I wrote. I don't know. And just like 3, it needs to be something that can be expandable and repeatable. Like, it can't be something like, oh, this is an awesome idea. Take, for example, early on is the Master Run idea for Dead Rising 1. I still think that's a good idea. The only problem is it's not very repeatable, even though I think it's a good idea. Like, I was able to do it for Dead Rising, and maybe I could do it for a couple other games. Like, I actually thought of doing it for Legacy of Kain. But at the end of the day, it's only relevant to people who play the game, and I have to invest a lot of time to get it to that level that it's just not really repeatable. even if like a couple one-off ones are. So I think that's really what I've been trying to solve this weekend, is trying to figure out what, using my resources and what I have now, how can I get to the stuff I want to get to? Because a lot of the YouTube stuff is meant to be something to like help me find my way to what I guess I eventually want out of it. I don't necessarily know, but I think about stuff like, originally at one point I was trying to make a D&D show just because I was playing D&D with my friends anyway. It's like, well, why not record it? And that didn't really work because I didn't have the technical expertise to do that, or like even really the situation to be able to film it. But ultimately that taught me about having a workflow, because that was way more footage I had to edit than I ever had before. And then I taught myself about just running multiple cameras or just doing live action. And there's so much in that like all those hours weren't wasted, because it basically became my podcast. And the point was, I didn't set out to make a podcast, but it just kind of came up that one day. It's like, hey, I could, because I essentially already figured out how to do it. So I'm hoping that somewhere along the lines, I'm going to try maybe a couple things and find out that maybe this is the one thing I want to go for. I don't know what that is just yet, but we'll see. Until then, I'm just planning on keeping on with Ruby on Rails, just general training, because I still would like to make a website. I still think that's something that could be very valuable. I've always wanted to be one of those guys I see like on like the Destiny Reddit, where they're like, hey, I made this tool where you can put in your gamer tag and it will pull all these data points and it'll construct this, like, I don't know, image or stats for you that are very useful. That'd be cool to be able to someone to write that service. Especially if you can like monetize that at all. Like just something simple like, here's some ads, it pays for itself and it drives traffic to the site. So then, hey, maybe that can get traffic on something else I'm doing. I'm not sure yet. I really just think I need to find some kind of like passion for one hobby, whatever it is. Like, I don't know, skit writing. Maybe I want to do something really narrative. Maybe I just like, hey man, I decided I really like this game I'm playing, so I'm gonna make my channel entirely about this now. I don't know. But I think that's what I'm trying to solve while I learn Ruby on Rails in the background. So yeah, this is a bit of a long rambling. It's been a weird weekend just because I'm not quite sure. I think it's been really interesting. A couple things I've just tried and looked at, but it's going to be interesting, I think, going forward, even if I'm probably going to be in a bit of a lull for content on the channel until I figure this out. As part of that, I think I have decided in my head that I'm going to be moving the podcast to once a month, just because that gives me plenty of time to do everything else. If I'm not making like a Let's Play series or anything else, it's not terrible. But what I like with it being once a month, which I haven't picked the date yet, I like the idea. It's very easy to get it done for that month, and it should be pretty easy to fill all the time. Plus, I'll be perfectly fine with like my storage limits on the podcast for the audio stuff. It'll make it just like very nice and easy, and then I'm hoping to use some of that extra time to kind of reformat the podcast into something maybe more formal. Because the podcast, I think, definitely has issues I'd like to solve. I just don't know how to do them right now, and I just haven't sat down and done. But I would like to really sit down and be like, hey, here's how we start a podcast, here's how we end a podcast, this is the sign off, this is the sign on. Then this is how we structure the background in my mind, like my notes, stuff like that. And I think the other thing I wanted to talk about before I go is just that I think one of the other big things I always had an issue with on channels, I don't really have any peers. Like in my own personal life, I don't have anyone that does the same thing. Like I have friends I'll go out hang out with, but no one's doing the same kind of YouTube thing. Or if they are, it's very different, like completely unrelated, not really something I could work with. And I think that's been difficult, because not that I want like someone like with 1,000 subscribers to come and give me a shout out, but it should be great. I always thought how fun it would be to just be like, hey, you stream? Oh, I kind of do something too. Like, you want to do something together? Like, it would just be fun because it's like a similar personality. And I think that's one of the main takeaways I kind of thought of this week, is I really need to find just people in my area that do something similar and try to build just a sense of community. Because while there's a lot of places for that with YouTube, I feel like you get your generic like, oh, let's do a collab, you know, so we can help out our Let's Plays channels. Like, I don't really want that. I actually want something I can consider like a peer, right? And I work with. I want something I can send my thumbnails to and be like, hey man, what do you think about this? Does this work? I want that guy. I don't want just, hey, can you give me a shout out so we can both get our subscribers up? So, but that's been kind of my whole rant I've been thinking about all weekend. As always, you can contact me on Twitter. It's at taken4grantd, or it's also my email, which is grant@taken4grantd.com. And I'll be back again next week.